In the dead of night, thriller echo. Concrete jungle, dreams bust to grow. Mets in the air, chase glory, no fear. Broken backs, but hearts steer clear. OMG, the chaos, what a scene. Streets buzzing like a machine. Grimace from the shadows, chills on my spine. Past haunts, the future shine. Comebacks in the night, keep dreams alive. Fighting tooth and nail just to survive. City's heartbeat echoes in our chant. Grit and glory is all we want. Brooklyn to Queens, hear the roar. From laughter to blood in every scar. Living legends made on this ground. From silence we scream, make a sound. Rising high, falling low, repeat again. Cycles of the game, addicted to the pen. Graffiti tales spray on the wall. Met saga, forever stand tall. Rivals smear, but we push on through. Every heartbeat bleeds, orange and blue. Grimace fades, turn into a storm. In the Mets family, we are reborn.
What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to Mets Talk Live, off-season edition, right here on the channel. Hopefully, everybody is enjoying their Sunday night and enjoyed a little bit of some football throughout your day, as the New York Mets basically started their off-season about a week ago. And the offseason really does kick off right after the World Series. And we got some exciting news to bring up in just a couple of minutes in regards to the offseason and the new show that is going to be taking place throughout the offseason with myself and Chris. So you get a hell of a lot more of us throughout the offseason with all the news, rumors, trades, free agent signings, and all that fun stuff that goes involved with the offseason. So make sure you hit that like button, guys. Subscribe to the channel if you're new to the channel, and hit that subscribe button, hit that notification button so you can get everything that you need for your offseason through the channel and through the new show that will be coming up right after the World Series. The day after the World Series, the first show will take place, and that's a good thing. So, what's the new show? Before we get into the rundown, before we get into the topics that we're going to talk about today, the new show is the new logo on the left below me is Mets Hot Stove Podcast. That's right, guys. Hot Stove Podcast, the Mets Hot Stove Podcast, the Mets Hot Stove Live, that it was originally called, is going into a podcast form where we're not just going to do things on YouTube, do streams on YouTube. We're also going to provide it on X. We're going to also provide it on Spotify and wherever you can get your podcast. So that's going to be fun for everybody who might not be able to listen to it fully on YouTube or watch it. You can listen to it in the audio form as well. So that's going to be always fun as well. And the reason why we are expanding the show as not just whenever something happens, we'll do a Mets Talk Live or a Mets Hot Stove. We thought it would be something that can bring everybody together as Met fans during the offseason when all the rumors, all the craziness that goes around. And we're not here to bullshit you. We're not here to lie to you. We're here to give you the facts when it comes to the New York Mets and what they might do and what they could do this offseason and all the rumors that are going to be, popping up as soon as the World Series ends, you're going to start hearing a lot of you saw MLB scoops on X and all these, burner accounts that start to put, crazy rumors out there that most of the time, if not all, are not true at all. So that's what we're going to do, me and Chris, during the offseason. We're also going to do our own content. We're going to do our own videos, our own live streams for Mets content. But we thought the pregame show that we did it started very small, right? It wasn't very popular, and then it got really popular through the middle of the season into the end of the season and obviously into the playoffs. So it took off because of the fact that you guys supported it and you kept on coming back for more of our faces and our thoughts and opinions, and of course your thoughts and opinions. So we do appreciate that. And why not keep it going during the offseason by a Mets Hot Stove podcast that is going to bring everything you need throughout the offseason. So that's a good thing. And we also have an X account for Mets Hot Stove. And it's right there on your screen, NYM Hot Stove. Make sure you follow that on X, guys. Please do. That is where a lot of our content is going to go. That's a lot of our show times and dates are going to happen. Any type of news that comes that gets involved with the podcast will be going on that account, not just our individual accounts. Obviously, we will post it from our individual accounts, but all the information is going to be coming on that account on New York NYM Hot Stove. We put it together yesterday. Chris did most of the work on that. The logo and all that stuff is our channel logos, and of course, you see it there, Mets Hot Stove Podcast. So make sure you follow, and if you don't have Twitter or X, just make sure that you subscribe to both of our channels, because our channels will be providing the content for Mets Hot Stove Podcast. And we're going to work hard here when it comes to this offseason, when it comes to the Hot Stove. We are going to do our very best. We are trying to not just bring our opinions, our information that we find on the content. I really want to get guests on. I want to get beat reporters. I want to get Major League Baseball reporters. I want to get Mets beat reporters, radio host. As you know, a couple of months ago during the trade deadline, Sal Licata came on from WFAN and spent about 40 minutes on the roundtable talking about the trade deadline, what he think the Mets should do. So that was awesome. He was great. And, we're going to do as much as we can to try to provide a couple of guests throughout the offseason to just get some information. And again, even if you don't think this guy's a good reporter or that guy's a good reporter or that woman's a good reporter, we don't want to have a reporter that just gives us what we like to hear. We want to hear what they believe, what they're hearing, and the truth of what's going on, right? We don't need no crazy news that nobody cares about or something that is completely false that they put out there to get some clicks. And that's what we're trying to avoid. So let's hope that it's a successful Mets Hot Stove, and the Mets have a lot of important decisions to make in the free agent department, definitely. And we'll see if they will be making trades. Obviously, I think it's going to be a lot of free agent signings, or at least big names that are going to be on the top targets for the New York Mets, as we'll get to in just a second. So remember, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. The best way to keep in touch, the best way to be notified that we're doing these live streams on both of our channels and the Hot Stove podcast is to subscribe to the channel. I know some people keep on saying that, sometimes they can't find the show, one show or this show. All you got to do is go onto our channel page. And if you're not a subscriber, all you got to do is type in, CP Mets and Knicks or Talkin Mets at Rob, and you will find our content and what we do together. So let's get started, guys. As David Stearns did have his press conference a couple of days ago. Obviously, that was the end of year press conference, the status and, the exit press conference for the New York Mets as they lost the NLCS to the Dodgers in Game 6. And obviously the team that the Mets lost to are basically dominating in the World Series against the New York Yankees, as we well know. And we'll get to that talk a little later in the show. So David Stearns said a lot in his press conference. I took a couple of notes while I was listening to it, just to get a quick rundown of the questions that he asked that, I really want to, talk about and see if you guys agree with it, because it is very interesting with some of these beat reporters, what they what they ask sometimes. It's like, come on, guys. Like, can you ask real questions here? We know we can't talk about free agents that are still playing or talking about guys that are not officially free agents until the World Series is over and 5 days after that. So, until they're, if they get the qualifying offer or if they're finally an unrestricted free agent. So, they asked question of regime. Let's see, what else did we got? Okay, so I like what he said, that he talked about the resilience of the team. He talked about it being tougher that it ended the way it did because how resilient this team was, how the chemistry was there, everything was just working with the team. It felt like magic that they weren't going to be stopped, and they did get stopped by the Dodgers. They helped that along the way, as I don't think the Dodgers played a great series. I think the Mets basically really did do a lot to, hamper their potential chance of winning, as they left 122 left on base in six games. Like, that's a lot of runners left on base. You get another 10% of those runs, you might have won 2 more games and you would have been in the World Series against the Yankees. But that's not how baseball works. You don't play well, you don't do your job, and you don't do the little things that matter. You end up going home and packing your bags. He also said that nothing is predetermined. This season's success doesn't mean success of next year. I actually love that comment. The reason why I love that comment, because he's not an idiot. He realizes this year means nothing next year. And I think too many fans fall in love with that concept or that idea that just because you were good this year means you're going to be good next year. And I think we have that mindset, not just Met fans, but in general baseball fans, that 95% of baseball aren't the Dodgers and the Yankees. They don't make the playoffs every year. They don't have 95 plus wins every year, right? Obviously, you want to strive for that, but you also got to understand that this year does not help you be successful next year. It really doesn't, because the last time I checked, the Texas Rangers won a World Series, but the year before that, they lost 90 games. So it didn't matter that they lost 90 games to sign all their free agents and win the World Series the next year. So the success or the lack of success the year prior has nothing to do with the following year. I think we have to get that through our heads as Met fans. I can care less about the other fans think of other teams. I just hope the Met fans realize that, yes, it was a great year. Yes, it was a fun year. Yes, it was an amazing, resilient comeback, 0-5, 11 games under, and then making the NLCS. It still fell short. As much as we are proud of this team, we do have to realize that we fell short because there was a lot of reasons why we fell short, right? The runners left on base, as I said earlier. Why is that? Well, maybe the guys on that team, certain guys, might not be here. They might not be able to do that job. They might not be the best guy in those moments. So you might have to replace those guys. You might have to get somebody better than those guys, or another star on the team that might put you over the top, right? Pitching, right? We all love Sean Manaea, right? He did outstanding work. He became our ace. But could we be honest for a second? This team never really had an ace, right? They never really had an ace. You could talk about his ERA, you could talk about that, but these are guys that have struggled in the prior years. You had guys that were injured in those prior years. You had guys that haven't pitched this many innings in many, many years. Severino since 2018. Sean Manaea, a guy probably hasn't pitched that much in about 4 years, maybe 5. These guys broke down at the end, and these were the guys you needed to count on the most to pitch well, and they did it at the end, right? This is not a detriment. This is not it's all Manaea's fault, because it's absolutely not. But he did pitch game 6. He did not have it in game 6. He looked exhausted. Now, that's not all his fault. That's not his fault. The innings caught up to him. The innings caught up to Severino. The innings caught up to a lot of guys. And the issue is, when you have a quote-unquote real ace, you and guys that actually can go 170, 180 innings and go at least that, and your ace usually is a guy that can give you more innings. That's a guy that's used to it. That's a guy that can throw those innings. You know that guy, when he goes on the mound, 99% of the time you can count on him to pitch well. And when you're used to those innings, and the ace are usually the ones that go deeper in the ball games. The ace is usually a guy that can be a stopper if there's a losing streak, stopper in a series that's an elimination game, right? This is not a detriment. This is not a knock on Sean Manaea or Severino. It's just a fact is being a fact. This team relied on guys that hasn't pitched this many innings in a very long time, right? I don't think anybody, I don't care if you had so much inspiration from this team or a lot of, hope going into the season this year that they can be very good. But nobody could have predicted an NLCS spot and to make the NLCS. It's kind of hard to do that. And the Mets did do that, right? And that's credit to a lot of the guys on his team. Sean Manaea and Severino are one of those guys. But again, when you rely on guys that have not done it in years prior in a while, and then expect them to be what they are projected to be or what they have been, one, it's not fair to them. 2, it shows you what happens when you lack that guy or those guys, because it catches up to you at some point, right? You can even, people can say, oh, well, look at the Dodgers. Yeah, their pitching staff was in shambles. But you know what? When you have 3 MVPs in your lineup, you have other guys who are actually, I do have a bad mic today. I'm not sure why. I keep on cutting out and I hear it in my headphones. It's kind of annoying, and I agree with you. And you can go to Wordy, enjoy. Nobody's stopping you. So the fact that those, with the Dodgers, they have 3 MVPs. They can overcome those pitching injuries, those pitching woes, because of the fact they can score with the best of them, right? When you have 3 MVPs in your lineup, and you got a guy like Teoscar Hernandez that had a great year with the Dodgers. You have Tommy Edmonds at the deadline, who has been outstanding for them. There's a lot of things that can actually, you can overcome those things when you have talent like that. The Mets clearly couldn't overcome that. Their offense or that their pitching kind of broke down at the end, and definitely in this NLCS series. And even Jose Quintana, right? You seen him that he was struggling. He didn't pitch a lot of innings last year, and now he pitched a lot of innings this year. They all broke down in this series, and now they completely relied on the offense to keep, in line with the Dodgers offense, and that clearly wasn't enough. And then you talk about the lineup, right? Our lineup wasn't even close to the Dodger lineup. It's not. They did not compare at all. And it's not just on paper. It is actually on the field. We saw it, right? The Dodgers basically knocked in almost 50% of their runners on base, when the Mets barely had over 26%, which is not terrible. It's league average in this NLCS, but it's not enough. It wasn't enough. And that shows you what they were missing, what they were lacking. And when you go into a season with a lot of one-year deal guys, a lot of deals that guys, a lot of teams passed over and didn't want to pay $13 million to Severino or give Sean Manaea, right away or starting a role in a rotation because he was kind of a hit or miss last year with the Giants and was in the bullpen starting pitching. He wasn't really a great pitcher. You got a lot of number threes. You got a lot of injury-prone guys that were given second chances here. And then when you overcome all those obstacles, which was great to watch, you get to the point where all those guys, when you get to that high point, which was the NLCS, they were completely shot. And that's including some guys in the lineup as well. And it's unfortunate. It sucks. But it shows you what you need. It shows you the guys you need to go after. Obviously experience is going to matter for our young kids like Vientos, who was the MVP of the postseason for the Mets, right? It was a lot of experience for Alvarez, right? Nimmo, even though he's a veteran, he's only played in 3 playoff games prior to this year, right? Alonso, the same thing. Now you can talk about a lot of these guys. Acuna, even though he didn't play a lot in the postseason, he was defensive replacements in the postseason. But guess what? The funny thing is that you still needed more. And I think David Stearns understands that. That's why I trust David Stearns. How can't you trust him? He took a lot of flyers on guys, and he was right almost, I would say, a good 80%, 85%, which was more than enough to get us to 89 wins and a playoff spot into the NLCS. So the interesting thing is, and yeah, Ken, I agree with you when it comes to Cole. But at the same time, what you also have to remember, and that this is not just one guy, right? It's not like the Yankees got here because of their pitching, right? We know who they didn't, the easy road they had in the playoffs. So I don't even look at that. But I also look at the season, right? Why are they successful? Because of Juan Soto and Aaron Judge. Aaron Judge had another MVP season. Obviously, he's not doing it in the postseason, but to get to the postseason, Juan Soto had a great year, obviously, once again, and Judge had an MVP season. You had Austin Wells, become a pretty good catcher, and he had a really good offensive season. You had, a lot of different guys. Verdugo have a really good first half. A lot of these guys did play extremely well, and their offense basically carried them most of the year when Cole was out, and their pitching wasn't good because Rodon was decent, but not as good. So what I'm saying when it comes to aces is that that's a guy you need to count on. And I'm not saying that, Cole, you can't count on them, but every time, if you're a fan of that team and your ace is on the mound, you feel very good about that game in the playoffs. You just do. So you have to remember that. And it's not just saying that that's all the Mets need, right? I'm not saying if the Mets had a Corbin Burns or, any ace pitcher you can think of, right? If Kodai Senga was healthy, right? You consider him the ace, I would, right? I think he can be that good. Would that have put us over the top in the NLCS? Probably, maybe. I mean, we did take the Dodgers to Game 6. So it's possible. But to look at it in that way and just say that, the Dodgers were just better. Yeah, of course, obviously they were. It was proven. But why were they better? And it was the lack of, the next level players that came through, right? Sean Manaea was so good, but again, He didn't do this in a couple of years now with the innings. Same thing with Severino. Same thing with a lot of the guys. A lot of them broke down. The pitching broke down for the Mets. And that's the unfortunate part when it comes to what happened with the Mets. But that's why the offseason is here to fix that, right? You got to get guys in trades and free agency that will get you to that level, right? We were 2 games from a World Series, guys, right? 2 games from the World Series mean we weren't that far away. We're not that far away. Now, the Mets have a ton of free agents, right? They got about 3 to 4 bullpen arms that they either got to acquire, sign, or retain. We know about the rotation. Basically, the whole rotation is a free agent for Stenga and Peterson. So you got to fill some spots here. Now, yeah, Manaea might come back. Maybe Severino will come back. Maybe the Mets will make a big signing like a Corbin Burns. A lot to go when it comes to that. So we're going to continue what David Stearns has said. And, of course, there's one question, of course, that is about Pete Alonso. What is your appetite to retain Pete, and how much does last 3 weeks change or alter your opinion about him? So his answer, he's a great Met. I hope we can have him back. We both understand this is a process, and everyone has his own interest, right? That was Stearns' answer. So the interesting thing about that answer is a lot of nothing, right? David Stearns is not going to play his hand. He's not stupid, right? We all saw what Pete Alonso did in the postseason. If it wasn't for that 3-run home run in the wild card, we would have never got that far, right? If it wasn't for that big home run, against the, when it comes to, with the Dodgers, right? That was a big home run in Game 5. So we know we saw how the big moments Pete Alonso had in the postseason, but you also have to be realistic. He did not have a good season in Pete Alonso terms, right? Are you going to overpay for a guy that might cost you $200 million? And I'm not saying that's going to stop you from getting a Juan Soto or Corbin Burns or Anthony Santander or something like that. But what I am saying is that you got to be smart with these long-term deals, right? You will be stupid if you believe that if you had to choose between Juan Soto or Pete Alonso, again, not the same position, but if you have to choose, you would be crazy not to pick Juan Soto. There's a reason why the Yankees in a World Series. Juan Soto had a lot to do with it. And I keep on talking about Juan Soto, that you want guys that are winners. And I'm not saying Pete Alonso is not a winner, right? But he's done a lot of losing on this team. He's a part of that. He is a part of this issue of losing, right? Had a good postseason. That is great. That is something that I'm always going to remind myself when I'm thinking about retaining Pete Alonso, because I do want to have Pete Alonso back, but I don't want to overpay for Pete Alonso. I'd rather overpay a 26-year-old who is MVP caliber, right? So if you have to pick between Alonso and Soto, if you pick Alonso, you are letting your Mets bias get in the way. Just because he's a homegrown Met, just because you love him, doesn't mean that's the smarter decision. Because you can't tell me 7 years of Soto will only make him, 31, 32 years old? 7 years of Pete Alonso, which you probably think Pete Alonso will get a 6 or 7 year deal, he was going to be in his late 30s. When Soto, if you gave him a 15-year deal, you're still going to get 6 or 7 years of his prime at the very least. So you have to take that into account. Yeah, Teoscar Hernandez is another guy as well, right? He's a winner. He's clutch. He's had really good seasons back-to-back. He's in the World Series right now, right? So that's a lot of things that you have to look at as well. So, again, we knew what David Stearns is going to say. It's interesting to hear, but when he says it, it's like he's not playing his hand. Smart guy. And a question that is interesting that I think a lot of people thought would happen after this season was over. Will you hire a GM? He says, I haven't made a firm decision. I'm not eager to do it. I think we have a good group of people in place to make the necessary decisions as an organization to help improve this team. I love that. You know what that says to me? David Stearns knows what he's doing. He doesn't want a guy, undermining him at every move, every time he has to make a decision. And you don't need that. If David Stearns has been a GM, David Stearns was a GM, was the president of baseball ops this year. He's done a really good job. Why are you going to mess things up? Even though we can get a guy that he trusts and believes in and has that same thought process, but why do you need another guy to, have a mouthpiece around the table when you're discussing offseason moves or trades or free agent signings or whatever, international signings, whatever you got to talk about? David Stearns can do that on his own. He thinks he's got a good group of guys around him. That's all he needs. I think more guys is a problem. So let David Stearns cook and let him, do what he does. And he's done a great job. And year one was pretty successful for a lot of people, calling him small market Stearns and garbage bin Stearns. And, this guy is going to have a small market mindset. And no, he had a very difficult situation this offseason. He had his predecessor in Billy Epler trade two, Hall of Famers in Scherzer and deGrom. I'm sorry, Scherzer and Verlander to get prospects. So your rotation, he had a deficit. He had a problem in his rotation. He had to fix it, but he also had a ton of money on the books. And with all that, all those issues he had to deal with, he still got the 89 wins and a postseason. So trust David Stearns. And does not need to be a GM. Another question was, where do you view Peterson, Buto, and McGill? He says, we'll see how offseason evolves. Obviously, that's a question that's like, he can't answer that when the offseason hasn't even started. Or when it ends, maybe. Right? Based on moves in the offseason and roles evolve over the course of a season, we'll determine that, obviously. So there you go there. Here's a nice question. This is one that I was really interested in his answer. He goes, somebody asked, what do you expect from Ronnie Mauricio? Now, we haven't heard this until the press conference. He says, we have to get him doing baseball activities, and that is going a lot slower than expected. So I didn't know, and I don't think a lot of people knew, if any at all, knew that Ronnie Mauricio wasn't doing baseball activity. You would think he hurt his knee in the Winter League before spring training. So this is over a year now where he still hasn't done baseball activity. That's concerning. 2, David Stearns is not happy with the progress. And 3, will he be ready for spring training? Will he be ready to fight for a spot on this team in 2025? That is something that we don't know. And David Stearns doesn't know. So I said it. A lot of us said it. I think Ronnie Mauricio will make the team, but I didn't know he wasn't doing baseball activity. I thought he was. Now that we know that he's not, that's an issue. Yeah, I am trying to read Super Chat. I'm sorry, I'm reading my notes for the David Stearns things, but give me a second. Let me find it. I saw it, and here it goes. I got it. Hold on, CD. Hold on, buddy. Hold on. There we go. I think Soto will approach 13 years, 550. Keep Pete and maybe Burns if budget allows. Would be tough to also keep Sevy and Manaea, though. Yeah, well, I don't think you're getting both. I don't think you're getting Soto and Pete Alonso. Now, I could see you getting Soto and Burns. I could see you keeping Pete and signing Burns and maybe going after a Teoscar Hernandez, somebody said in the chat, or even, go after Anthony Santander. It's going to cost you probably $200, $300 million less to get a guy like Anthony Santander, but he provides a lot of power. He provides a solid average. He provides RBIs. So that there's a lot of ways to go, but I don't think one has to do. I don't think the position players have anything to do with the starters. I think if David Stearns and Cohen's going to give him the room to make the moves he wants to make, regardless of how much money's involved. I think David Stearns is going to have an open wallet. to be quite honest with you. All right, let's keep on going here, guys. Hold on. And I did hear about Martino saying that the Dodgers will be in on Soto. Well, why wouldn't they be? They're in on everybody every single year. All right, give me a second. I'm just running through the comments before I go back to the notes. Easy says 5 years, 130 million. As high as I go for Alonso. Yeah, we'll get to that in a second. Let me just finish the Stearns stuff, and then we can get the rest of the topics. What else did he say? What was it? They talked about if Pete leaves, would you move Vientos to first base? Obviously, he's not going to say yes or no because the offseason is going to dictate if Vientos will be moving from third to first, or if you get a 1 year, a stopgap for 1 year before, like a guy like Ryan Clifford, who is projected to be a first baseman going forward in our minor league system. So there's a lot to look at that. Here's one. This is one last one I'm going to get to. You have a lot of money coming off the books. The question was asked. You'll be operated at more of a financial flexibility and freedom that you ever had. What's the opportunity and challenge of that? That's a great question. Stearns goes, we got financial flexibility, means that the entirety of the player universe is potentially accessible to us. It's an enormous opportunity. I envision us taking advantage of that financial flexibility and being aggressive in certain spots. Great answer. We also want to recognize that we want to set up our organizational pattern so that we can invest in free agents. We do have a lot of money coming off the books, and I expect us to spend some of that. A good portion of that to complement our team, to improve our team as well. Also not going to do anything that hamstrings us in the future years. So that is you can make your own suggestions and your own opinions about that. Look, David Stearns is going to do what's best for the team. If he believes that a player is not worth the value that they're asking for, he's not going to do that. He's going to give him an offer that he feels comfortable with. And yes, sometimes it might stretch along his comfort zone, but if he believes in that player, then so be it. I'm on board with it. Right? If the Soto deal gets, and there's 3 teams, say the Dodgers, Yankees, and Mets are the 3 favorites, and they just keep on going back and forth with offers, and it keeps on going up and up and up. Yeah, of course I want Juan Soto, but do I want to give him $800 million for 15 years or $700 million for 15 years? And that might hinder other players that we might get. If Soto stops us from getting Burns and says, I don't know, give me another player that we want to get. Say it is a Pete Alonso as well. Right, and it's Juan Soto and say a guy like Walker Buehler who's coming off an injury last year and is still trying to figure it out this year, right? Will you sign Walker Buehler maybe the second year after injury, after recovering and pitching this year but getting his innings up? Maybe he'll have a really big year going out. Would you do that? So there's a lot to look into that when it comes to that. I think David Stearns is going to be smart about it, but he's not stupid. If he values the player and not worried about the money in that aspect, he will do it. All right, here we go. Mauricio injury helps Beatty. I don't think it helps Beatty as much as you think. Right? I think Beatty is more of a trade piece than anything else. I think there's always a team that looks at a Brett Beatty that is young and cheap. And if there's a guy on like a team like the Nationals that is still trying to, build up their team, there's a team like, there's the Marlins, a lot of teams that like to be cheap and not try to win. You can always get a reliever for a Brett Beatty, or maybe, a piece that you might need in the bullpen or, in the rotation, maybe like a 5th starter, or even a guy that's like a 6 or 7 type of guy. Because David Stearns did talk about in the press conference as well, he might go to a 6-man rotation. He likes the 6-man rotation. I don't necessarily like that, but when you got Kodai Senga, who likes to pitch on extra rest, you might have to do that. So it's going to be very interesting this offseason when it comes to Mauricio and Beatty and others. Yes, CD, that would be nice. Lindor, Soto, Vientos, Nimmo, Pete. Yep. Ryan says, you were caught pushed outside Citi Field? Yeah, and I still make more money than you. Sorry, I just had to say that. Oh, I'm just continuing to check the comments really quick so we can get to the next rundown. All right, so the crazy deGrom rumor that popped up out of nowhere, like right after the Mets lost the NLCS, was that you keep on hearing about the reunion with Jacob deGrom, and I'm like, what? The guy hasn't pitched in 2 years, more than what? A handful of games in 2 years? The Mets had injuries. The Mets had guys that they signed coming back from injury, coming back from bad seasons. And then I'm like, why would David Stearns? And then they talked about, giving back Texas, Luisano Acuna, and maybe throwing Brett Beatty in that deal as well for deGrom. And then the Mets will probably have to take on most of that money. And I'm like, and then, there are some Met fans that can't get over the fact that the Mets did not offer a contract to Jacob deGrom and were pissed about it, even though it ended up being the right decision, right? Yes, he won a World Series, but he had no part in that. Yes, deGrom was a great Met, but he was also a very often injured Met that cost the Mets in a few seasons where they might have made the playoffs, in particular 2019, right? We all love what he did. Back-to-back Cy Young, great Met. I mean, I never seen a guy do that in my lifetime, what he did on the mound, right? I wasn't a live receiver. I was barely alive with Doc when he came up with the Mets. Like, we know what he's done, but his health, his age, you can't put your trust in that, even though, yeah, I'd love deGrom to be wearing a Mets uniform. I'd love to hear a simple man playing when he warms up. But realistically, it's a stupid decision or move. And if David Stearns would make that trade, he should be fired because that's just a dumb move. First off, you don't know at all what you're getting from Jacob deGrom. We know if he's healthy, and again, the thing with deGrom that always annoyed me, if he wasn't feeling 100%, he would not pitch. He wouldn't pitch due to aches and pains. He wouldn't pitch if he felt a little something. He would just not pitch. Yet you had guys like Severino, you had guys like Manai, you had guys all over this team playing with bad injuries and injuries, plantar fasciitis, playing his ass off or trying to do it best he can. Yet this was a guy that if he felt 99.5%, he wouldn't pitch. That pissed me off. And on top of that, he was waiting for a big payday. He was not going to risk that big payday. And what annoyed me about 2022 with Jacob deGrom was that he could have came back sooner and didn't. Remember all that situation when it came with Jacob deGrom where, he's going to be back. He's only going to throw 2 rehab starts and it ended up being 5 because he didn't feel 100%. Yet 85% of Jacob deGrom is probably better than half of Major League Baseball starters at 100%. That always pissed me off. That, Jacob deGrom coming back a month earlier or 3 weeks earlier and getting 3 or 4 more starts. Maybe those games that he started or would have started, we would have won a couple of those games. And those Braves games in September wouldn't have mattered. Those things have a trickle-down effect. Those things mattered. And people forget that because too many Mets fans have this bias, the same bias that they have with Pete Alonso, until they finally realize how much of a product of padding the stats he was. That they overlooked the problems that player caused. And because Jacob deGrom didn't come back when he should have and pitched 3 more rehab starts, that is possibly 2 to 5 games we could have won. And maybe winning that division and not losing the division at the end of the year could have changed the whole outcome of our playoff hopes and going on a long run. People got that. People forgot that. So, and this is not saying that deGrom shouldn't get a big payday or he shouldn't be looking for it, but he hurt his team because he protected himself, which is fine. right? You got to protect your golden arm. This is your moneymaker, right? But when the team needs you, and remember, this is when Scherzer was out for 6 weeks. This is when, the starting rotation was throwing Tyler McGill out there, was throwing other guys out there that didn't belong in this rotation. Even though the rotation, remember, Chris Bassett was our ace. We didn't have no deGrom and Scherzer at one point for a little over 6 weeks. And that was when deGrom was supposed to come back and he didn't. That was frustrating. But that trade rumor is ridiculous. If David Stearns makes that move, he should be fired. As much as I love him, that's the dumbest trade you can do. All right, let's go with something else. Should the Mets keep Pete Alonso? Very broad question, especially for me in general. As I've said for years, everybody laughed at Lindor and padding his stats, and a couple of other guys padding his stats on the Mets. Yet Pete Alonso was one of the biggest products of that, right? How many years the Mets were basically out of it in late July, early August, and he went on a tear for the final 2 months when the games didn't matter. He did that so often that people didn't care because you can't talk any bad things about Pete Alonso. But they can talk about it with Lindor. They can talk about it with many other players. So, do we keep Pete Alonso? I want to only keep Pete Alonso for the right price. And the price that I think Stearns is not passing is that so-called offer that he offered prior to the season. What was it? 6 years, 170 and change, or 167, or whatever the heck it was. Close to 170. I don't think the Mets going further than now. Maybe. Now, this isn't my opinion. This is a fact. Did the postseason add a few $1 million to the Mets offer and saying, hey, he deserves to get paid. I'm not giving him more than 6 years. I'm going nowhere close to $200 million. So what do? Right? Do you overplay for a homegrown guy because he's quote unquote your guy? Or do you be smart about it and you can do a lot of different things this offseason to improve your team without Pete Alonso? And all I hear, how can you replace that production? How can you replace that production? You can. It doesn't have to just be one player to replace that production, right? Everybody's like, oh, how can you replace 40 and 110? Well, you can do that by 2 other guys in your lineup hitting 25 apiece and knocking in 85 RBIs, right? It extends your lineup. It makes your lineup bigger. It makes your lineup longer, right? I know that's not pleasing to a lot of people, but the reason the Mets were better was because Vientos was a 25 home run guy. Lindor was a near 30 home run guy, right? You had extra guys that helped out when Pete Alonso wasn't doing what he should have been doing, right? So if the Mets sign Juan Soto and say they sign another guy, I don't know, pick a guy. Say if they get a first baseman, right? Say if it's not Pete Alonso, but it's a quality guy that can hit 20 home runs for you, right? You have a 25 home run guy in Juan Soto. You have a 20 home run guy of another guy. That is 45 home runs. You just replace Pete Alonso's home runs with 2 guys, right? They get there with 2 guys with the home runs. The RBIs, right? You see Soto, what did he had? 85 RBIs this year, 85 RBIs. You get a first baseman that hits 20 home runs and knocks in 70 RBIs. Well, that's 150 RBIs right there. Well, that already beats the RBI total for Pete Alonso. So not only do you extend your lineup, but you already replaced the production that one player does. So you lengthen your lineup, you provide the RBIs and home runs that Pete Alonso was with 2 players, and you still got Nimmo, you still got Lindor. You got Alvarez. You got Vientos. So you're already talking about 6 guys in your lineup. If you just have Pete Alonso and not those other 2 guys, it's only 5 guys. But that's if Pete Alonso can actually do what Pete Alonso needs to do. You can't tell me that Pete Alonso is going to be what I've seen 2-3 years ago. We don't know that. Can he? Yeah. But I always ask people to dig deeper into Pete Alonso's stats, right? His runners in scoring position aren't a shock. Now, this year was absolutely terrible. Now, his prior years wasn't that bad, but they weren't good. And that's why when I talk about the big games, the clutch situations for Pete Alonso, and obviously, right, the postseason happened, so I am taking that into consideration. If I have a guy in Pete Alonso that can hit big home runs in the postseason, you know damn well I think he deserves a little bit more money. But I'm going easy on the years. I don't think it's the money that's the issue. But when you get to closer to $200 million, you're going to have to extend the years. Because if you don't, you're going to end up giving Pete Alonso $30 to $35 million if you keep it around a 6-year deal, if you stretch it out to $200 million. So I don't know if Mets want to do that. I mean, I don't think the money would matter, but I don't know if Pete Alonso is taking 6 years. That's the issue that nobody wants to talk about, right? Pete Alonso wants security, and security for players, yes, it's about the money, but it's definitely the years. If Pete Alonso can get 2 more years or even 1 more year from another team, he's going to take it. If you don't believe that, you are very naive. And that's something that you have to understand. And the Mets, I don't want the Mets to hamstring themselves for years 7 and 8 just to retain Pete Alonso that will break down in probably 3 to 4 years. There might be a chance of that. And that means you got about 5 to 6 more years of that contract that is not going to be very pleasing. Now, DH helps because you can always move Pete Alonso to DH so you can talk about the DH. But when people talked about the 10-year, the long-term deal we gave Francisco Lindor, he was what, 27? When the Mets traded for him, 26, 27 years old? So you already got nearly almost, next year would be the half-year point to his contract. And he's still in his prime. So you're talking about the end of, say, about 7 to year 10, which is about 4 years on the back end of Lindor's contract that might not end well. But you got 5 to 6 years prior that were all in his prime. So that's not a bad contract. The issue, when I talk about big contracts, I want guys for at least 60% of that contract to be in their prime years, to get their best performances from them. Because the end of contracts are usually going to be bad because they get older. That's why when people talk about a 10 to 12-year deal with Juan Soto, 10 years into that contract, he's going to be 36 years old. So you might get 7, 8 years of prime Juan Soto before he breaks down and not is the Juan Soto we remember in his early years. That's the crazy part. That is the crazy part. But again, Pete Alonso, yes, I would love to keep him, but it has to be for the right price and the right years, in my opinion. Mets free agent targets, guys. It's very simple, right? It's Juan Soto. It's Corbin Burns. It's probably, if it's not Juan Soto, I think the second part is going to be Anthony Santander. And somebody brought up Teoscar Hernandez, which is not a bad choice, right? But that means the Mets might have to make moves, like trading Starlin Marte away and is near $17 million for this year, right? Or will they eat money to trade him to a team that might just be looking for a stopgap, a guy that's coming off the books after next year, right? Something like that. Is it a possibility? And yeah, we can talk about Alex Bregman. I don't think you need to worry about the infield, about acquiring guys or signing guys, because I think the infield is basically ready to go. You can have second base. You still have McNeil. You have Acuna. You have Mauricio. There's a lot of options around the infield where if you want to have Vientos, if you want Acuna there, you want Vientos there, or you want Mauricio there as well, you can always move Vientos to first base if you really need to. which I won't. But if you really need to and put Mauricio at third base, Acuna at second, you can do that. So you'll have an infield that you don't need to spend $150 million for a guy that's probably not going to give you more than 3-4 years prime, maybe in a deal where you might get 7 or 8 years in Bregman. Right? I think you have to go for the big outfielder, the Juan Soto, the Anthony Santander, the Teoscar Hernandez. That's probably the smarter play because the Mets have a ton of infield prospects. And with Acuna looking like he most likely could be a good addition and could be a player at this league, he might have the opportunity to play second base. Right? That might be McNeil might be traded for maybe a bullpen piece. Right? Third base, Vientos isn't established. But if you have to move him to first base to play Mauricio, I'm okay with that. I don't think Vientos deserves that, but I think Vientos could develop into a solid first baseman. That's also where we can look at, a situation. But the 3 targets, in my opinion, the big names is Corbin Burnes, Juan Soto, and Anthony Santander. Now, the good thing about Juan Soto, Anthony Santander, and now we can throw in Teoscar Hernandez, is the fact that there's a plan A, there's a plan B, and there's a plan C. We always know a guy like Teoscar Hernandez, a guy like Anthony Santander are not going to sign before Juan Soto. They want to see what Juan Soto gets so they have a price point. Okay, Juan Soto is going to get 10 years, $500 million. Say that's what it is, right? Anthony Santander, who's the next biggest free agent outfielder, is going to say, well, he just upped the ante here. I want 8 years at $28 million, $30 million, right? Those guys are going to play off of the Juan Soto contract. So the Mets are in a good spot. Because if they don't get Juan Soto, they can pivot to plan B. And if Anthony Santander doesn't work out, they got a plan C. Now, if they lose out on all 3 of them, something went terribly wrong. I would be shocked if the Mets don't have one of those guys playing right field next year. I'd be shocked. That would be very disappointing in my opinion, regardless of who we have in the farm system. I know we got Drew Gilbert. I know we got Ryan Clifford. But I want one of those guys. And we have to see. It's going to be fun, and that's why we're doing Mets Hot Stuff. That's why we have a new podcast show for you guys, because it's going to be a lot to talk about. World Series talk. Ooh, that's my favorite topic. You know why? Because the Yankees are finally showing that they've been frauds the whole time. Right? This has been known for 2.5 weeks now while the playoffs have been going on. Why? Because they played the lowly Kansas City Royals and the not very good Cleveland Guardians, who faced the White Sox 13 times this year, that played a Twins team that has fell apart the final 2 months, that couldn't win a ball game. And you see what happens when 2 teams that are in the Central play bad teams, and a lot of bad teams were in the American League. And you get to face them in the NLDS and the NLCS, right? Look, the Yankees still had to win those games, right? But you already seen 2 games of the World Series against the Dodgers, against a formidable opponent, against a really damn good team. The same mistakes the Yankees were making in the NLDS against Kansas City and the NLCS against the Guardians, right? Making those errors, making base running mistakes, not cutting off balls, not hitting with runners on base and runners in scoring position, situational hitting. When you make those mistakes, it's easy to overcome them when you're playing teams that can't take advantage of your mistakes. In the Kansas City Royals and the Guardians, they didn't. We all forget that, or at least Yankee fans do. Right? The Kansas City Royals, they have a really good pitching staff, right? But what was their problem? Their offense was a problem. They were just striking out at will. They were taking bad at-bats. And they lost because of it. And that was with the Yankees making a ton of mistakes. And then the Guardian series, couldn't have been a worse series for the New York Yankees. The errors, the base running blunders, the stupid, the bad defense, the lack of runs in scoring position. If they didn't hit home runs, they didn't score. They won that series based on home runs. And you can say, well, home runs matter. Yeah, absolutely. But it matters when the team you're facing has one legit starting pitcher, because that's what the Guardians had. They had one legit starting pitcher, and they basically had openers for every other game. And when you have openers for every other game, you got to use a lot of your bullpen. You got to use a lot of the same guys. And we all know, as good as everybody is in that Guardians bullpen, when you see them every game, at some point, the major league player is going to eventually hit them. And they're not going to, when relievers, like the great Class A, the guys, almost all the Guardians relievers that were really good, lights out. In a 7-game, or at least in this case, a 5-game series, when they're used to pitching one day, maybe having a day off, pitching one day, maybe having 2 days off, they couldn't do that in that NLCS. They pitched basically 4 out of the 5 days, if not 5 out of the 5 games out of the 5 games. It was the same people. So your professional hitters should be able to see the same pitchers over and over again and finally hit them. That's what happened. That was the downfall of the Guardians, because they had to throw out the same pitchers over and over again because they had no starters. So for all the Yankee fans, and I listened to WFAN, Chris McMonagle, Keith McPherson, those guys were talking about, stop talking about the Mets. The Yankees didn't face anybody. They didn't. They faced bad opponents. Those mistakes you made in the NLDS and the NLCS, you didn't have to worry about, because the teams weren't good enough and their roster showed that. The Guardians were in the NLCS and they had one legit starter. Don't tell me that you didn't have an easy go of it. Just because, the Guardians had some moments was because the Yankees were just bad in the series. Not because it's not like the Yankees were playing great and the Guardians stuck a few wins in there. It's because the Yankees sucked so bad that the Guardians snuck a game or two. That's basically what it was. So, and now in the Dodgers series, the lack of runners in scoring position, the bad World Series by Judge and the postseason by Judge, not helping cause. Juan Soto's trying to do everything. Stanton hit a home run, right? Volpe isn't Derek Jeter. Hopefully Yankee fans finally realize that. Gleyber Torres is their best postseason hitter other than Juan Soto, but he's taking a step back a little bit. Nobody else on that team is stepping up. Jazz Chisholm isn't hitting well, and it took him to the 9th inning, and a guy that they've seen again in training in back-to-back days who threw over 50 pitches, they got to him a little bit, but they still didn't get the job done. So the errors, which they made in this series, the bad base running that they already had, the bad route to balls and bad defense the Yankees already had, it's catching up to them because the Dodgers don't the Dodgers capitalize on that mistake when the Guardians and the Royals weren't good enough to capitalize on those mistakes. Now, the Guardians did a little bit, but they're not good enough to capitalize on all the mistakes like the Dodgers did. And you could say, well, they were close games. Yeah, well, of course. You expect the Yankees to do everything they can to win a ball game. So I expect them to try hard. It's the freaking World Series. But if you really watch those games, the Dodgers were just better. And they capitalized on every freaking mistake. You didn't get that runner in? Man, did it cost the Yankees. And it happened twice already. And now they're down 0-2 going back to Yankee Stadium. So we'll see about that. And now they're relying on Clark Schmidt and Luis Gil in games 3 and 4. Possibility, if the Yankees lose game 3, Cole might have to come on short rest to save the season. So that's crazy. So the World Series, the Dodgers are up 2-0. The Yankees are finally facing a really good team where you make a mistake, you will pay, unlike the Kansas City Royals and the Cleveland Guardians did not make you pay because they weren't good enough. All right. So I know Yankee fans are going to probably clip that and make a mockery of it and probably troll, but that's okay, right? That's what I'm here for. For you guys, Yankee fans, to bitch and moan and worry about the Mets when you really shouldn't because you're in the World Series, right? Let Met fans talk about the Yankees, right? We're not in the World Series. We're dealing with our offseason. And one of your players are one of our key free agent targets. That's why we're talking about you. And your MVP looks like, I mean, Pete Alonso has played in about, what, 12 postseason games in his career. And Judge has played in like 60, maybe a little more than that. And Pete Alonso has better stats than Aaron Judge. So unless Judge has a crazy rest of the World Series, oh boy. Yeah, explosive. Of course he was, because Yankee fans don't know how to act. Did you see the video on X, on social media, where the watch party at Billy's that is across the street from Yankee Stadium, where when Otani got hurt and they were booing and, well, actually they were cheering and guys were putting their middle fingers up and all that stuff. We know they're a douchebags fan base, right? They're not a respectable fan base, right? They throw shit on the field. And you know what? I just watched a documentary on Netflix about the 2004 Boston Red Sox and the comeback against the Yankees. In that series, if it was 2003, was it 2003? Yes, it was 2003 or 4, 2003, whatever it was. It was in the playoffs, and there was a controversial call, and Yankee fans at Yankee Stadium were throwing shit on the field. So this is going back years of Yankee fans. They are a sour bunch. They're privileged. They are spoiled, which is understandable. But they don't act like human beings when they don't get their way. And you've seen it last year with the Guardians when they got into it with the fans and they started throwing shit. It's crazy. Jeremy, the Yankees were down 2-0 to the Braves and came back to 1. Yes. 96. That team had Jeter. That team had Posada, Williams, Pettit. That team was a dynasty in the making. This Yankee team is not even close. All right. That is an embarrassment to talk about the 96 Yankees compared to the 2024 Yankees. That is an embarrassment. Don't talk about that, right? I respect that. I can't stand the Yankees, but I respect the hell out of that dynasty Yankees because that is almost impossible to do. To say that these Yankees can come back from 2-0, yes, obviously, mathematically they can. But this team is not even close to the team they were in 96. You know, they were down 2-0 in 98, weren't they? To the Padres? So, yeah, but yeah, that's fine, Jeremy. I understand that. But again, the past means nothing, right? If you want to talk about that, look what the stat the Mets, the Fox brokers brought up, right? Between the Dodgers and the Yankees in their history in the World Series, a team that led 2-0 won the World Series. So you can look at that history as well. You can find anywhere in history for your team and look for a bad moment and a good moment to make you feel better or, win an argument. So, and I agree with that, Explosive. I think Dave Roberts could fuck this up for the Dodgers because he isn't a good manager, right? I think taking out Yamamoto in the 7th inning with 1 out just was a misuse of your bullpen. There was no need for it. He was dealing. He had 86 pitches. Let him finish the 7th inning. He had to use 3 pitches because he took out Yamamoto with 1 out in the 7th inning. Stupid. But, hey, listen, it's not my team, right? I'm not sitting there I'm not actively rooting for a team in the World Series. I'm not, right? Do I have like, I don't like rooting for the team that just beat my team to make the World Series. And look, if the Dodgers were facing any other American League team, I'd be rooting for that American League team. But I can't root for the Yankees. You're not a real Mets fan if you root for the Yankees. You're just not. So, unfortunately, well, they're on exactly. So, look, it's game 3, right? The Yankees need to win at least 2 of these games to get at least to a game 6, because it could end at Yankee Stadium and the Dodgers could be celebrating on Yankee Stadium soil. And it's and you know what? I don't want to root for the Dodgers to beat the Yankees. That's what annoys me, because I hate rooting for the team that beat us. But it's the Yankee fans that are continuing, especially on WFN. If Ken, you're still in the chat, we listen to it all the time. We message each other back and forth about the shows all the time, right? All the time, you got Yankee fans calling up, complaining about the Mets fan, talking about them, laughing it up that the Yankees are losing in the World Series. What did you expect? If the Mets were in the World Series losing to the Guardians, Yankee fans would be laughing at us. But the fact that you're caring so much about the Mets fan and what they're saying, Yankee fans should just blow it off. Worry about winning the series, the World Series. That should be your main focus. Who cares what the Mets fan thinks? You know why? Because we live in your head. The little brother shouldn't live in your head. It should be the other way around. We have nothing else to do but to shit talk about the Yankees because their season is done. We all know that. You're not fooling us and saying, hey, your season's over. No shit. So suck it up and worry about the World Series, because I was listening, because I was off last night, listening to the overnight callers, and almost every caller talked about the Mets fan and them, bitching and moaning about, oh, the Mets fans are laughing at us and blah, blah, and hoping we lose and dancing on our graves, basically, and all that stuff. And then they would make their point about the World Series. Make the point about the World Series first, and then you probably bring up the Mets fan. Maybe I'll have a little bit more respect for you. But don't bring up the Mets first. And then talk about the World Series, because clearly in your thought process, the World Series is secondary, but you're the same fan base that says World Series or bust. It took you 15 years to get back there. Enjoy the freaking World Series. Stop worrying about the Mets. Like, I just don't understand that logic. If we're the so-called little brother, the big brother shouldn't worry about the little brother until we maybe in the future win a World Series and take over the town. But until we do that, don't worry about us. It's so stupid. But I digress. My final thoughts is going to be talking about the new show that me and Chris are going to have throughout the offseason. And it's called Mets Hot Stove Podcast. All right. It's a podcast solely based on this Mets offseason. Right? We set up a X account. It's right there on the screen below me. NYM Hot Stove is the handle on X. Make sure you follow that on X. Please do it as soon as possible, because all the content will be going directly to the Hot Stove. Obviously, my channel and Chris's channel, we always go live on our X account, but we also want to make sure that on Mets Hot Stove, all that content and all those live streams are going to be directed to that X account as well. So if you follow that, you don't have to worry about going to our X account and trying to find it. You can just go on NYM Hot Stove. And when we go live, it will be in that account as well. And you'll be ready to go. You can find it. It'll be simple. And on top of that, we got a whole new background. We got a crazy new logo that we put together. We're going to have, I already put some new music together. and I sent Chris about 3 or 4 new songs that involves our names, Hot Stove, Grimace, ONG, the Mets, the city of Queens, New York, and all that fun stuff. You know, I got a rap version, I got a rock/hip hop version, similar to the one that I played before the stream. And there's a one that's like a pop rock type of song as well. So I'm going to make, Chris is probably, hopefully listening to them. And I did get a message from him, so he's probably listening to them. And then when we decide on a song, when Hot Stove starts, which is the day after the World Series ends, because that's when the offseason officially starts, and that's where we're kicking off the Mets Hot Stove podcast. So subscribe to the our channels. If you haven't followed our channels on X, mine is at TMWRNYM, and Chris is at CPNY Sports on X. And make sure follow the official Mets Hot Stove podcast account at NYM Hot Stove, so you can always be in the know, always be ready for our streams, and hopefully have a successful off season. And we have a lot to talk about. So, guys, thank you for tuning in. It was constant, over 100 people in the stream. I always do appreciate it. I know the off season is here. The Mets aren't playing, so it's not easy to come on the stream and talk about the Mets, because it does suck that we're not in the World Series and talking pre- and post-game. But that's unfortunate, right? We can't change that. All we can do is look forward and to the future of our New York Mets going into 2025. And hopefully it's a successful offseason and we be ready to do better things in 2025 than we did in 2024. Once again, guys, thank you for tuning in to Mets Talk Live Offseason Edition. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the World Series. I know all you guys are rooting for the Dodgers. I understand that. Cindy, yes. That's another thing, guys. If you can't always watch it on YouTube and you want to listen to the audio, it's going to be on all spots or areas that you can listen to a podcast, right? Spotify, Pandora, Apple, all of that. It's going to be on everything. I'm going to make sure of that. I haven't even spoke to Chris about it, but I was going to, we have a lot to talk about with it because it is a new show. We both have ideas. So I want to get that out there to the podcast world in other streaming areas so people can listen to it while they're at work, right? You can't always watch a YouTube video for an hour while you're at work, right? Some people can listen to it. So that's what we're going to do. So thank you for tuning in to Mets Talk Live Offseason Edition. This will be probably very few Mets Talk Lives because of the Hot Stove show that's going to take place. But we'll see. At the moment, guys, enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Enjoy the rest of the World Series. I'll see you very, very shortly. I got a video coming out about the offseason and possible trade that was discussed earlier today, and I might do something about that. So look out for that probably in the next day or two. With that said, guys, everybody have a great night. As always, Mets fans, let's go Mets. And I'll see you next time, guys. Have a great night. Let's go Mets.
In the dead of night, full of echo. Concrete jungle, dreams bust to grow. Mets in the air, chase glory, no fear. Broken backs, but hearts steer clear. OMG, the chaos, what a scene. Streets buzzing like a machine. Grimace from the shadows, chills on my spine. Past haunts, the future shine.